so many things, and I also have a hot take on what my letter grade for this episode is.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, dude, I am exhausted.
You get good times.
It's been a long day. It's been a long week.
Oh, yeah. It has. There's a lot going on.
So much stuff going on. By the way, I got some new fun stuff we're going to play with tonight, but I'll tease you with one of them right now. Let me know if you can hear this. Did you hear that? Did the sound effect? No sound effect? Darn.
I just heard. I heard kind of a, but I didn't know if that was the music. It was like.
Let's see. Where's the music? Here. Did you hear that? Like
nope.
Oh man. No sound effect. Darn it. I have these new. Why isn't it coming through? I'll have to play with it. I built these new sound effects in from my Stream Deck, but I don't know why it's not coming through the recording. It's been so cool. It was gonna be so cool. Like these sci-fi. The Stream Deck apparently has a ton of built-in sound effects that I never knew about that you can just go find and download, like thousands of them. And so I was able to download a couple of the deck, and I was like, oh my gosh, these sound kind of cool. But apparently I haven't set the Stream Deck up completely, so we'll figure that out. Oh man, yeah. I watched the episode, and when my wife and I were watching this, I was like furiously taking notes. Like, no, I gotta remember to take notes. Ryan always does this. I gotta take notes on my phone. And I got the opportunity to do like 5 minutes worth of notes while I was watching the episode yesterday. And then I just didn't get any more chances last night or today to actually watch it again. Because that's what I wanted to do is what you were describing, which is watch the show one time and then just watch. Just be entertained by it. Just enjoy it. Cool. And then come back and watch it again where I can take notes and have observations and things like that. But I just have not had time. Our schedule's been so cramped lately.
Oh no, I mean, like I was late coming on because I was literally watching it again.
Oh wow!
Before our show, like I was like, I want to make sure I'm as fresh into this as possible, and so it said directed by Dave Filoni, and I was in the episode. I came right into here. So I mean, I'm like, yeah, like I said, it's funny because it's so easy. The last, I feel like my last episode, or I'm sorry, episode 4 of the Boba Fett show, I had maybe 4 or 5 things I wrote down.
Okay.
And sometimes I come into the shows that we have here, and I'll come into the shows, and I'll have an idea of maybe like 4 or 5 things I want to cover, and I'll just like make kind of bullet points. And with this, the last 2 Boba Fett episodes, I have been coming in with pages of notes. Yeah, this last episode, I thought the previous one couldn't be topped, and this one, just wow. Yeah.
Well, there you go. I just realized I made a mistake, by the way, on the stream too. I'm sorry. I was checking our stream while you were talking to make sure everything was working right, and I streamed it wrong. So the stream is going out. It's on all the platforms. It's totally fine. But the original placeholder I put on all the platforms didn't get used. If on my software, by default, if you just hit go live, it just goes live. You have to make sure if you've scheduled, there's a little menu where you pick the thing that you scheduled so that it goes live to that scheduled event. So it's still working, and it's streaming everywhere for everyone who's watching, but it didn't use all the notes and the title and all the stuff that I put out there, so...
Oh,
it's not
okay.
a big deal. That's all right. It's not a huge deal. But...
yeah, because now we're going to get into the show, and we have so much to talk about.
Oh, my God. So much to talk about. Okay, I'm going to kick it off. Let's get into it. Let's
do it.
I did remember some things, though. I did get this all changed, so we're good. All that's working. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Kessel Chat. And for at least another week, the Boba Fett chat, because that's mostly what our brains are consumed with at this point. Like, there's a lot of Star Wars things happening right now, but this show is kind of just... And fair warning to everybody, I even posted it on, I think, the original portion of the stream. It's not how it turned out, but... probably going to be spoilers again for everybody watching. Apologies, but I don't know how we can talk about this episode and not have spoilers. I don't know how we would possibly do it. There's just too much.
Yeah. No, full on alert. This is going to be not a spoiler free review. Maybe we can do like the first 10 minutes. I love your title about how kind of Dave Filoni brings all the feels. Maybe we just talk about our thoughts generally about it, and that way if you've not watched the latest episode of The Mandalorian, you can kind of get you get our impressions. You get our impressions. So
that's a great idea.
We were just talking about this in the pre-show. We were talking about this before the title sequence here, about how, I mean, Jeff texted me. What was it? Yesterday, you texted me and you said, did you watch Book of Boba Fett yet? Because wow. And and all I thought was this week is gonna be great. Like, us coming into this episode is gonna be unbelievable. So why don't we just talk about like first impressions? We don't need to get into specifics. We can just talk about what did we like, what we felt about this episode.
Yeah.
And why don't you kick us off?
How did I feel about this episode? So many feelings.
Yeah.
Going into the episode, I was curious, like really curious. Like, okay, we're hearing a lot. Clearly, the way episode 5 wrapped up, a lot is going to happen. Like, Boba Fett wasn't even in episode 5. He was just mentioned. Fennec Shand was in it at the very end. Like, we were like, okay, something's going to happen. But I think even on the internet, when I was looking through all the different social media channels, people weren't talking about in the last episode, leading into this one, Mando's Din Djarin's comment about, I got to go see somebody first, or I have to do a thing first, whatever his exact words were. And we're like, yeah, that means he's going to go do something with this thing that he just got from the armor. So it was all the speculation of like, what's going to happen? How much are they going to show? Is he just going to disappear for a bit and come back, and that's going to be the end of it? Like, are we going to see anything? Who knows? So to come into the episode and start watching it and have it basically immediately start off someplace that is very clearly not Tatooine. I don't have to describe it. Like, just he enters from space and you just see a planet in the distance and you're like, oh my gosh, what are we about to watch? It's not going to be quick and fast. Like, what are we about to see happen? And so I was just excited. I was nervous. I was optimistic. But I was also very excited. I did not know Filoni was actually doing this episode, or I didn't know he did this episode. But I'm like, if they're coming off the heels of Bryce Dallas Howard, it's going to be something. They're ramping up to something. They used Robert Rodriguez for a portion of the first couple of episodes, I feel like, to set the tone of this like Western, not just Western, but like the, as you described, sort of Godfather-esque, like really set the tone of that. But then they moved directors and they changed over to like Bryce, and she brought a very different vibe. And it kind of made me feel like, I don't know if there's a different director. I remember thinking to myself, I don't know if there's going to be a different director, but I would like her to do more, but I kind of feel like they need to change it up even again to take it to the final. Like, it'd be kind of cool if they did a couple closing different directors towards the end, just to give the story kind of a more an evolving feel as it comes to the conclusion in episode 7. But I will say that all of that, I was actually at my comic book store today, today and yesterday. When I was there yesterday, I was talking to the owner for a minute, and what was interesting in the conversation is he made the comment that there's been so much contention about, like, The Mandalorian felt like it was episodic, like things were happening constantly, and this has felt sort of different than that, very different than that. I'm like, yeah, I agree with that. And he said what's different is it's a book. He goes, and the title really starts to make more sense now that this is a book, and we are seeing chapters in that book. And even though it will end for this season at episode 7, it'll complete there. It's a book, so the book is not over. The book is going to continue, and I think that was something that when he called that out, I'm like, oh, that's, we're still going to get another season of Mandalorian, of course, but it was so interesting to think about the Book of Boba Fett that way, that in books, and I think we've talked about this, in books, you don't just follow one character the entire time. Like the Witcher series I've been listening to, like, yes, it follows Geralt a lot, but it switches over to Dandelion and to Yennefer. It goes from their points of view multiple times in different contexts to come back to the original character. And that's exactly what the Book of Boba Fett is doing. People, I think, are not quite used to that so much in these types of TV shows, or they weren't expecting it. You should be used to it because it's very common in TV shows to bounce around the character. There's no main character like on 30 Rock, or maybe there's a main character in 30 Rock, but it moves around and the perspective changes
Yes.
to different characters throughout various episodes. You can't just follow one character all of the time. I mean, you can, but even in The Mandalorian, that didn't quite happen that way all the time too. So I was really excited to see how they were going to play out the story on the screen, as much as I was excited about like bits and pieces we were going to find out, what kind of new who's going to show up, who's going to be there to help, all these things. I was also very excited to see how are they going to roll that into the next story and keep this thing evolving.
Yeah, I agree with you on so many points. And a part of this is going to be my reserved hot take on what my letter grade is for this episode. And we'll get to that. But I agree with
Burying the
you.
lead, I like it.
Yeah, I agree with you about the book title. And what I keep thinking about is, if I'm right, The Mandalorian season 1 and 2, they were all chapters, right? It always was chapter 1, chapter this, And originally I kind of took that as, and Star Wars has used this in other properties, chapters versus episodes. Because of course, famously the Star Wars movies are episodes. And then there's been things like the Clone Wars, the animated Clone Wars was chapters. And so I watched that and I just kind of threw that away, chapters. And then the more that I was watching the Book of Boba Fett, the more that I was thinking like what you were talking about with, oh, this is like Game of Thrones. Or if you want to even, which Game of Thrones is, each chapter is a perspective, is told from a first person perspective of a character. So you'll have a Jon Snow chapter, and then you'll have a Daenerys chapter, and that's how you move, that's how you progress through the narrative. The narrative structure is driven by the characters. And by the way, there's a really great old book that's like that, and it's Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula is told through like a lot of different letters, and sometimes you're following Mina, sometimes you're following Jonathan, sometimes you're following Van Helsing. And in all of these, it's set up like chapters in a book. It's set up in chapters like a book, chapters in a book, and that's why now I can see how the Book of Boba Fett is a great title for what they were trying to achieve. I will say it has not been well communicated what that is. And so because of that, I actually think this is the big failure of the Book of Boba Fett, is how it was marketed and how it has been pushed out there, when in reality, what great stories do is they introduce you to a character, and then they pull back and they introduce a wider set of characters, and then they pull back and they introduce a larger set of characters, and you can still kind of exist in this world. And what I feel like happened that was wrong is this is feeling more and more, and I like it, like Mandalorian season 3, and it's okay that we have different chapters in this book that we visit with other characters. It's like a Mandalorian universe or the Star Wars universe, and you're spending more time with these with this larger group of characters. And I think the pushback against this entire series, I think, has been, oh well, this is all about Boba Fett. This is, and oh, I don't like this. Like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? And now we're getting all of these other characters. I might have even set up the narrative a little bit differently. I might have actually had, I would have maybe retitled this series, or I would have had some of the things that we're seeing now appear earlier in the series. Because I think that's been the major failure, is where this is going. I'm liking it. Where it started in comparison, very confusing.
Yeah, I very much agree. When we were talking about this early on, we even had, both of us had comments about how the first couple episodes were shaping out and how they felt in the larger narrative. And they're good. Don't get me wrong; they're not bad, but it you've had so far in the series or in the season to really stick with you've had in the series to really stick with the show. Just stay with it. It'll all play out. And it has. I mean, it definitely has. But to your point, a casual viewer stepping in would see the first episode. Oh, wow, really cool. We're learning some fun stuff. Second episode, okay, kind of feels like the first one a little bit. Like you're repeating the same process with new information. Okay. Third episode almost kind of still felt the same way. It's like, are you just repeating the exact same process with new information and you're not really advancing us that much further? I'm kind of confused. Like that's how the first three really played out. A general audience or passerby, I don't know they would have really wanted to stick around. Like, oh, if this is what Star Wars is, it felt almost it could have had this cheesy vibe to it if you weren't really super engaged in it. It could come across that way. I could see it coming across that way to somebody. And I think you have to stick with it. And to your point, cool. And for us, we're totally going to stick with it. But for a casual observer who's just wanting to maybe this could be my thing, I could easily see like, oh, nope, not my thing. Moving on.
Yeah. I honestly, I wish this is going to be one of these are going to be one of these episodes. And by the way, I see Jock's comment that's here. And yes, Jock, we're going to jump into spoilers. And I don't want to spoil how unbelievably amazing this episode is. So as much as I would love, and maybe we have to have Jock on the show sometime, as much as we want to get into this, I will say spoilers. We'll be talking about spoilers in a little bit.
This first part of the show is just going to be like I just kind of sharing our feelings about the show, and then we're going to get into like the actual spoiler heavy stuff, because I don't know that we can talk about this episode realistically much more than we're doing right now without actually saying anything that. And yes, you are right, Jock. I am absolutely overanalyzing it. That's what we do here. This is welcome to the Kessel chat.
It's the Kessel couch. Basically. And we as fans, we sit down and go over this.
I just need my scally cap and a meerschaum pipe, and I would be set right now.
So one of the things, and again, keeping spoiler free, is I feel like if you are a Star Wars fan, and this can be for all the groups, those people that are like, I'm a true fan. People that grew up in the 1980s or earlier, and Star Wars was we saw the original Star Wars in the theater. For people that grew up with the prequels, if you came to this in the sequels, all of this was for you. That this episode touched on every possible Star Wars property. And did so in a way that, in my opinion, and I know that there's probably a lot of people out there that can be like, oh, that was fan service, and this is fan service. And I think it's okay to have these types of references as long as they're pushing, like they're part of telling the story. Oh my gosh. There were so many things. I actually wrote down in my notes. And again, I think we were talking about this before. Everybody knows I love taking notes on this. There was so many things that were in this episode that were callbacks, and it wasn't just nostalgia. It was relevant to bring up. It was great to bring up. There were so many little nuggets of things, whether they were from one of the episodes of the prequels, whether they were from previous episodes of The Mandalorian. All of these little things, like, for example, you were talking about, Jeff, without getting into spoilers, the planet that Mando is going to right at the start. And I am going to just bring this up. This isn't a spoiler, but there's a kind of a cool thing that's happening with these spider-like droids. And right when I saw the layout of everything, I was like, oh, I've seen this before. This was in The Force Awakens. These are things that I loved. But yeah, I feel like this was almost a love letter to people that if you are a Star Wars fan, there was so much in this episode to enjoy.
Yes, 100%. Mm-hmm. Should we just get into it? Because we've done 20 minutes in. We're 20 minutes in. We can totally get it. And Jock just said he's going to bounce before the spoilers, so don't just catch the replay, Jock. No big deal. I was with you when um, when he flew into that planet, I don't even actually know which planet that he's on. I didn't go look it up to find out, but it reminded me of that intro. Actually, reminded me a bit of Rogue One, in that there wasn't so much of a they do like the Mandalorian show does, where he comes out of hyperspace this way and then pivots real quick over to the shot of the planet or where he's going, and I like that a lot as opposed to the shot of space crawl down. It very much had a vibe of two things. One, it reminded me a bit of Rogue One, where every time they cut to a planet, it's just planet is there and then they're flying in. They're not panning down from the star line. They're just going in, and almost a kind of like we saw with in the Clone Wars, Attack of the Clones, when the Nubian ship is flying in supposedly with Padme in it, and as it flies towards Coruscant, it starts to invert itself to get ready to actually land on the planet. This intro, the maneuver he took in the beginning, it reminded me a lot of both the Rogue One and that episode. So I was feeling like, oh wow, there's drawbacks, or there's pull-ins from several different places, even in these individual shots that they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, just there were so many visual reminders of things that happened in other ones. There were sound reminders of things. There's the music. There's a lot of music callbacks, obviously very famous music callbacks. But even small ones, like when you're on the planet, there's some callbacks to Mandalorian season 2. Some of the music that you hear, like when Grogu wants to eat the eggs, he wants to eat those eggs, and the little music, the little kind of like very soft, it sounds like music from Minecraft. There is all of these little things that I feel like if you were to put them side by side, like put some of the shots side by side, you would see them. But there is a cool thing that I almost said this is verging on too much. It's verging on too much, but it was just enough for me. If it was a drop more, I would have been like, ooh, you crossed the line. And it was that this episode is balancing all these things. It's trying to balance the storyline that's happening in the Boba Fett storyline. It's trying to balance things that are happening with Mandalorian. It's trying to balance all of these movie references, Star Wars references, movies from the 1970s. But it was also balancing two things that Star Wars has always done when it's at its best, which is a balance of Western cinema and philosophy. And when I mean Western cinema, I also mean like that. I'll lump the spaghetti westerns. I'll lump in old West movies, like the spaghetti westerns or the Searchers or things like that, and also Western cinemas, Western philosophies, and Eastern cinema and Eastern philosophy. And at times I was like, oh my gosh, like I could call out the references to these movies where I was like, oh, this looks like Sergio Leone. This looks like spaghetti western. Oh, this looks like something that is coming out of Hong Kong cinema or Taiwanese cinema. The balance that was happening there was unbelievable. And I just could not get over it. And I felt like it was also there, and this is my first spoiler, the balance between the Mandalorian creed and the Jedi philosophy that was happening.
Yes, and there's a whole scene we'll get to here in a little bit that how do I say this? There's a scene we'll talk about in a few minutes. It's towards the end of the episode, so we'll wait for that. But that brings both of those two philosophies right into the forefront, and you have to you are forced to reckon with both in the same moment. And it's there's a juxtaposition, but it's this, actually I'm just going to talk about it. There's this juxtaposition in that situation that fascinates me, because the two things, they're so different, but they're not played out in a way that are opposite, as in like the way the stories tend to play the Jedi and the Sith, as if they're opposites. They're not opposites, but they're played as if they're polars as if they're a binary and polars to each other. They're not. If you really think about them, they're not. But
Yeah.
this tried to almost play them in that way too, where the Jedi are this way and the Mandalorians are this way. This variant of the Mandalorian creed, as we talked about in our last show, that this isn't really what this isn't like original Mandalorians. It's the derivative from Death Watch and the things how they're kind of how that creed has kind of ignored a few other things. But I feel like Din and what he is doing right now is actually evolving what he grew up as a Mandalorian creed, which is I think actually really good. I think I actually like that, so I'm actually pretty okay with how the scene played out at the end. I want to come back to it in a minute, but that I loved that a lot. Something I did want to call out is, to your point, the Eastern philosophy things. I really loved how they contrasted Dagobah and Luke learning from Yoda in the right in the beginning when Din lands on this planet. He lands on this planet, and within a few minutes, when we finally see Luke and Grogu together. Sorry, spoilers have now started. If you didn't catch that, spoilers have now started. When you first see Luke, when you first see Din and he arrives on the planet, I already started getting these vibes. When I first saw Luke and his interactions with Grogu, I immediately felt like, wow, this planet is like the non-swampy version of Dagobah. It is Dagobah if Dagobah wasn't a swamp. This is the way the camera pans through the bamboo, which is definitely the Eastern, like the landscapes. Oh my God, the landscapes are 100% like, I'm thinking like Shangri-La and these sorts of mythical places in many Eastern cultures. That sort of thing. Hidden lakes in mountains and ravines and crevices that no one can find. Bamboo forests everywhere. Like it felt like an Eastern and pristine version of the dark side, the light side of the moon from the dark side of the moon that is Dagobah. Not that Dagobah was bad, but like it's if you shine the sun directly on Dagobah without any fog for like a month or two, this is maybe what it could actually look like. But Dagobah is just perpetually in fog all the time. It felt like that to me. Like I wrote that down. Mando landing on the planet felt like Luke's arrival on Dagobah for the second time. That was exactly what came into my mind. The second time he lands there, it's clean. Not clean, but it's his landing is safe. His landing is prepared. He lands. It's all good. He doesn't crash and whatever else. He lands and he feels that way, and then immediately you feel like this planet to me just felt like this is Dagobah if the sun was shining all the time.
Yeah, I loved it. I love the design. I feel like we got to talk about how and again, we're this full spoilers now, so you got to pull the plug if you're not ready for this. The episode starts on Tatooine, and then it transitions. We get a little interplay with the Marshal, and Timothy Oliphant is back.
Always amazing. Love him.
I love that guy
so well.
I'll take Deadwood in space. That is fine. Give me Deadwood in space. Every time Bullock shows up, I'm like, great. Let's stay here. That guy is great. The setting of that town is great. And again, I even wrote in that sequence, the way that all the dialogue was coming out, I was just like, this is almost. Go ahead.
I have to say it. You said Seth Bullock, and for anyone who's watched Deadwood before, the way that as soon as Timothy Oliphant showed up on screen, and he plays this Seth Bullock like character, but the only thing I could think of, I think I looked at my wife and said, you know what? Because she only has watched a little bit of Deadwood. I'm like, Timothy Oliphant is basically playing a version of Seth Bullock if he was really stoned. And really stoned and became super chill all of a sudden. Because Seth Bullock is not chill and has no sense of humor of any kind really in the Deadwood TV show. But if you got that guy baked and he was just like, I'm just cool with everything. That's how he plays the character in the show, and I really love that because it's like, he's good, but he's taking himself only seriously enough, and that's about it.
It's very much like a new take on The Man with No Name, because that's how Clint Eastwood was. Like Clint Eastwood's in a gunfight at one point, and for a few dollars more, and he's like, that was foolish of you, old man. Like he's so laid back, but it's this great little sequence. And again, I'm like, ooh, we're almost getting too Old West. Remember, this is a galaxy far, far away, and now it's a little too Old West.
Yeah.
And then we jump then we jump to the planet, the visit of the planet, and I feel like we can't talk about this episode anymore until we talk about the effect that they did
Oh my
to
gosh.
bring back the young Luke. Now, really, what was the big comment at the end of Mandalorian season 2 was, "Ooh, I don't know if that like the fake Luke look." And then they hired the kid that did deep fakes on
Yes.
YouTube, and
Yes.
then I don't know how this happened, but I was watching that and I was like, "That looks like Mark Hamill. That looks like a young Mark Hamill."
Yes.
And again, we just had another viewer, I think, join in. We're in spoilers on this episode here for the latest episode of The Mandalorian. So if you haven't watched it, drop now. But
I mean, stay with the show, but just
stay with the show. But yeah, subscribe, like and subscribe, like and subscribe. But yeah, that was I could not get over how I was like, did they go back in time somehow and get a sports almanac too, maybe, and come all the way forward? I saw someone put a bet on the NFC and AFC championship game, won $500,000. So obviously went back in time, grabbed Mark Hamill, grabbed a sports almanac, came back, and then made these episodes because, oh my gosh, that looked like Mark Hamill.
Oh, it's so
that was unbelievable.
I had to pause a couple of times to look, but it is even beyond looking like him, because it absolutely, like exactly what you said, absolutely looks so much like him. Their effects are so amazing. But on top of that, like there's no even like facial distortions when he's talking and moving around, where the lips look like they're fake and not moving the way they're supposed to for someone talking. Absolutely not happening. Like
no
motion,
uncanny valley.
The motion capture technology has come so far from what Andy Serkis sort of pioneered back in the day of Lord of the Rings, and even pre-Lord of the Rings with Planet of the Apes, to where it is now that you can also add that sort of deep fake style overlay on top of it. When you married the two things together, we get what we saw in that episode, where he looked it was like looking at this is clearly Mark Hamill when he was young. Wow. Okay, like that's the dude right there.
It looked so good that I feel like we could do a whole episode, Jeff, on I don't know if I'm cool with it. It looked so good that I'm like, I don't know if this is good that it worked so well.
Right.
Because I was in the camp that I was like, just hire Sebastian Stan and make him the new Luke Skywalker. Let him be it, because he's a good actor, and Mark Hamill's already like, this kid, Sebastian Stan, I am possibly your father. It's like I'm okay with these roles almost being like roles in a play, and they're going to just be played by different actors sometimes, and I'm okay with that at this point. Like Mark Hamill, things got to change, but this looked so good, I had to stop and think, am I okay with this? Because then it's like, where does this stop? Where does this stop? I feel like we might have opened a door here that I don't know how it closes.
Where's that proverbial box? What's it called?
Yeah, exactly.
Starts with a P, I think.
Yeah.
Oh man, actually, you just mentioned Mark Hamill and that line about Sebastian Stan. I may be your father. There is a line in this episode that I had to pause and just stop on. Just again, talking about something that could just open up into an entire episode. Like you probably wrote it down. Is it so much like your father? Yes, I heard her. Right, I heard Ahsoka say so. In the episode, Ahsoka shows up. If you haven't, hopefully you've seen it. But Ahsoka is there, meets Den, and then there's interactions. And when she says to Luke, towards the end of the episode, when things are happening, and she says, "So much like your father," I was like, "What in the actual F?" Oh my God! Because it so much comes wrapped up in that statement. So much, because it's not just the statement she says. It's not just her saying that. It's the casual nature that she says it, and more importantly, it's the casual nature by which Luke reacts to it. He doesn't react. He looks at her with this sort of passing whimsical look of like, "Oh yeah, like I remember when we talked about my dad that you was your master." Like he just was like, "Yeah, cool," and instantly like, "Oh my God, they have now had this conversation. Like the two of them have talked. Luke knows who his dad really was, He knows who he
Yeah.
really was to Ahsoka. He knows things. She's told him a lot of things about his dad, and I'm like, just my mind was just like gears were like stopping in my head as the machine was like, wait, error, what happened?
Yeah, I mean, there was a part of me that I was almost hoping that Luke would walk over to Mando and go like, "Oh, my mom got you that ship." Like, I liked that line so much. There were just all of these little Star Wars nuggets that like Star Wars does its best when it's got these little like kernels, these little perfect drips of wisdom, and they were all over this episode. It reminded me of like episode 7. I'm sorry, episode 8, The Last Jedi, where Yoda says that's the problem with being a mentor is or something like your student you are what your students grow beyond. I mean, that is like an unbelievable sentiment.
Yeah.
That's the burden of the mentor, is that you are what the your apprentice grows beyond. Oh gosh, I mean, this episode had lines like things about how the student guides the master. There is another line that's later between Mando and our good friend Bullock, the marshal, and it was a line that there's no easy way to ask for a favor. I mean, these are like so great. But okay, we're on the planet. I know that we're jumping around a little bit, but we're on the planet. Mando shows up, he runs into my favorite character in the entire Star Wars franchise, R2D2, the hero.
Dude.
I mean,
when the scene comes in and you see the little antenna spinning, I'm like,
yeah.
is it? It's R2E, and all of a sudden it scrolls. I'm like, yeah, it's R2. I think I did I loved it. I think I did that. I went, oh, it's R2.
Oh no, I was like, this is great. It was like, again, I get to spend time with friends. Yes. This was so great. I was not expecting Ahsoka to show up, and then there is this thing that also, I mean, talk about these little kernels of wisdom and truths and life truths that drop in. One of the other things that I love is there was a gentleman who worked on the prequels, and he talked about the importance of building Star Wars visual moments and things that are uniquely Star Wars. And when Mando arrives on the planet, and just like you were talking about, that like turn of the ship and landing, him getting out, seeing R2, he then sees all of these little spider droids picking up rocks and building a structure. And so he runs into Ahsoka, and Ahsoka says, Mando says, "What is this?" And Ahsoka says, "It will one day be a great school."
She's like, "It's nothing now."
Yes, it's nothing now,
but it will be a great school.
Yes, and it's so great. And that sequence, which they spend a little bit of time on, I mean, it's like a full minute of watching these robots build this, the great things that you see in Star Wars that are like a visual story, part of like the visual storytelling. It's it is usually almost always an analog or a metaphor for something that's going on in the story. And so here you've got these robots very carefully placing the stones one at a time, building this structure just like the story is being built. I think of like episode 2, which again has its problems, Attack of the Clones. But the sequence where you see all of the clones kind of marching about, that is such a Star Wars moment, especially at the end of that movie, and Palpatine's watching from the balcony. When you have the callback in episode 3 to the what is it, the Potemkin stairs, where it's the marching, where Darth Vader, Anakin, now Darth Vader, is leading a brigade of stormtroopers to execute Order 66. That's a Star Wars moment. And in this episode, it's a Star Wars moment that we now get to see from the other side. Because while Ahsoka and Mando are talking and those spider droids are working and building up that thing, we cut now to Luke and Grogu training together, and Grogu struggling with his past, and Luke saying, "Would you like me to help you
Oh
remember?"
my gosh. Okay,
And
I'm glad
that
you went here
is
next.
unbelievable what happened.
And it was so casual the way he did it.
Yeah,
The way that he was like, I
yeah.
can just give you those memories back. No hesitation. They didn't
I
make it
can
a
help
big
you
deal. They
remember.
didn't make it a big, like, we have to go through all this struggle. Are you sure you want to know this? No, it's like, would you like me to help you? What I wrote down for myself was the Jedi Temple massacre was so much more intense than the glimpse we had in Return of the Sith. So when we see it in Return of the Sith, where troopers going through and killing people, we don't really see Anakin do any of that until the hollow recordings that Yoda
Yes.
plays back for Obi-Wan later on. We do see him walk into the room with all the younglings, but we don't see anything happen. We just it's very much implied what happens, and we learn what happens later on. But in this, to see it from Grogu's perspective, not just it happening and three Jedi defending him, and clearly he was on someone's back. He was in a pouch on someone's back, being held, or on a droid's back somehow. I hope we learn who that was at some point.
Yes.
Find out who actually was taking him out of the temple. But to watch the three Jedi fall, and to watch the clone troopers do it, it stirred a lot of emotions for me in a way that was more so than how it played out in the movie. Because in the movie, it's like, oh crap, it's wartime, and yeah, this sucks. But you kind of saw this coming. We already knew this was coming. But in this, to see it from the perspective of this little child that, yeah, 50 years old, but is a child, is just an infant.
Yeah.
Is a little, like one of our kids when they were infants, watching these protectors, these people that have raised him and taught him what life is, being slaughtered right in front of him.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like how when we get to the end of the episode here in a minute, like it to me really makes that ending scene in the episode even more powerful, because you're like, yes, this is what he knew growing up, but then the person who's protecting him for the longest time is over here, and he's got a massively emotional connection to that person in the here and the now. And that's, again, another interesting play to Jedi should not live in the past, because the past is already done. You can't live in the future because you don't know what's in the future. All you can do is live in the here and the now. Don't get distracted by the side things. Well, it played that out. Like, well, he doesn't want to live in the past, but he's stuck in his past because that's what happened to him. But the here and the now is with Mando, or was with Mando. Even though he's with Luke now, most of his most current memories are with Din Djarin. And I thought that was, I don't know, that's a really interesting connection between that memory and what we see happen at the end of the show.
Yeah, and by the way, the care that was done in the reproduction of that scene, where the clone troopers that are coming in to fire on the Jedi, they're all wearing like the what is it, the 101st? It's the blue. It's the that entire sequence is great. The effect of him remembering, by the way, is the same effect as when Anakin is seeing the future and he's seeing Padme
Yes.
die in childbirth. It's the same, the halo effect.
That halo effect. Yeah.
It's the same effect. Again, all of these little visual callbacks. That was an amazing thing. But I found that whole build up to that was so great. You've got Ahsoka saying, this nothing now, it'll be a great school, and Grogu will be its first student. You cut to Luke, you see that Grogu's still trying to eat frogs, and then there's this moment where Luke picks up all the frogs with the Force. And I don't know if it's Jedi or not, but then he just drops them, the poor frogs.
Poor frogs. They're all like in the air, like, what is happening?
and you're seeing all of this like dynamic between an older Luke, which is, by the way, I feel like for a specific part of the fan base, there's a great story out on the internet called Star Wars Has a Luke Problem. It's a good read. I don't agree with necessarily all of it, but I think it brings up a lot of really interesting points. I'm not saying that it's a good or bad article. Just, read it and see it for yourself. But this episode gives people, I feel like, a Luke Skywalker that they wanted to see in the sequel trilogy. I actually am okay with the Luke Skywalker that we got in The Last Jedi. I feel like I didn't need an old Luke Skywalker to be like this. I'm okay that he's jaded. He feels like a failure. But yeah, this was this was great. This was a great way for people who wanted to see a Luke as a teacher, Luke as someone who is trying to build people up. Um, this was great. This
Yeah.
was great and I enjoyed that. I
Yeah,
enjoyed
I
it.
totally agree.
I enjoyed it a lot.
A couple of things I wanted to touch on is one. I like your comparison of the Luke that we see here and the Luke in Return of the Last Jedi. I'm with you. I like the Luke that we see there, because it really makes you start thinking if this is where, like, in the little bits, the tiny bit that we saw in the flashbacks of his interaction with Ben Solo and how the temple got burned down. Or the school got burned
Same
down.
temple. Same
Yeah,
temple,
same,
by the way. Great
yes.
callback from episode
Love
7.
That. Love
this
that.
is the temple that's being built
Yes.
that you see burnt in episode 7. Again, people keep coming into the show, and we try to say it as many times. We are full spoiler at this point.
Yeah.
We apologize.
Absolutely.
Because this
Derek,
episode's
I'm sorry.
so great.
Derek just joined and realized that, it's going to be spoilers. Amy's been here for a bit. Rich has been here for a bit. I think Jock's still around someplace too. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah.
I thank you for hanging around with all the spoilers.
Thanks for hanging around. We're so excited to talk with you about this episode, and we definitely don't want to spoil it for anybody. But you were saying.
That comparison between the two, what I love about it is that we see, like you said, exactly what you said about this is what people were hoping Luke would look like in Last Jedi. But what I love about it is even in what we saw, in the way that he interacts with Grogu, where and in the way that he passes along messages to him about his teacher, it's like it is very much him teaching from memory, but he has no other than Ahsoka being there right at that moment. He has nobody else who's guiding him. So he's just going, and he's going a little bit off the cuff. And to me, that was if we didn't know it already, that is foreshadowing for how he ends up like the Luke that is in Last Jedi. Because what we're seeing here is he's doing the best he can from memory and teaching. But even in some of the words he says to him, like that scene where Grogu lifts the one frog, and Luke looks at him, and then is like, kind of gives him the look, and Grogu stops, and then he lifts all the frogs, and Grogu looks over, and then he drops them all. And he has this kind of a stern look on his face for a minute with Grogu, but then he softens it and says, okay, let's go do something else. And I'm like, if you took that could be taken as very innocuous, but I think it's actually a foreshadowing to what's going to end up happening with Luke over time, where he doesn't actually know these answers, so he's filling in blanks that he thought he could do on his own. And as anybody would, you're going to make some mistakes and have some successes, but what ended up happening is it ultimately led him down a path of getting cocky. Like, he got a little overconfident in himself eventually. But this, to me, was like, this was the beginning of that. This was like, it's fine, but we get to see a little bit of that in his interactions with Grogu. I'm like, that's good. Like, he's great. Things are good. He's questioned himself and all that. But his story could have gone a different direction, but it didn't. And I think that's okay. I like how they did that.
People who have watched this show before know that I'm a big fan of Michael Beretti. He has a channel on YouTube called Belated Media, and he did he did these 3 things called What If Episode 1 was good, What If Episode 2 was good, What If Episode 3 was good. And one of the things he talks about, which again, like I can make a case that Episode 1's a solid movie. It's my master's thesis. The real thing though is that he has this great line. Michael talks about how when you're doing a show or something like Star Wars, where it's a bit of a prequel, it's a bit of a sequel, it's got to feel old but new again. And one of the things that's great is this can be a different Luke character. He doesn't need to be the Luke from The Last Jedi. In fact, it actually is kind of mournful that we know that we can see that Luke is putting all of this love and energy into building this school and into trying to be successful in doing the thing that Yoda tells him, the second to the last thing that Yoda tells him before he goes into the Force, which he says, pass on what you have learned. And then he does it in almost the exact same order that he learned it. He talks to Grogu about the Force the way that Obi-Wan talked to him. He talks about he's trying to get Grogu to jump. He brings out the remote to test your reflexes, like with Obi-Wan, and he gives a lot of the same things, a lot of the same speeches that Yoda gave to him, but in brand new ways, like saying, my teacher Yoda, who was just like you, he said, don't judge me by my size, and he used to speak in riddles, and in reality, he spoke in a way to make Luke find the truth, to make Luke kind of do the work to get there. And, luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. All that stuff's Yoda. And he even has his own version of the famous Yoda line, which is Grogu is trying to use the Force, and Luke says, "Don't try, do." And I was like, this is great. This is exactly, this is the,
when I heard him say
all of these callbacks are great.
Oh, I love it. When I heard him say that exact line, don't try, do. It actually made me hear it in a different way. I mean, obviously it was a different wording, but it made me really think about, like, wow, this almost to me makes more sense than what Yoda said. What Yoda said kind of required you to pick apart that puzzle a little bit more, whereas what Luke said was a more pragmatic version. To me, it came across as a more pragmatic version of the same thing. You're literally telling them what to do. Now, I think that's good, especially for a young kid and all that. I think it's him using his own voice to pass on the teaching. But for me, it also goes back to the, as Amy called out here, it also goes back to, I think what we start to see is what Luke is like now, and probably how he gets where he is at, is he does make some changes to some of the things that Yoda passed on to him, and he says it in a way that actually is how he talks. The challenge with that is, as we find out later on, and you and I've talked about before, is especially with, certain types of religious dogma, is that if your whole structure is belief and structure and teaching style is based off of the rules and the guidelines as opposed to the core, at some point it is very easy to lose your way because you don't have a good place to fall back on. You don't have a solid core. And I think that line right there is a good indication of that, is you are passing along something that your teacher taught you and you're using it again. But I don't know that you fully understand not just the meaning behind it, but the reason why Yoda said it the way he did. It wasn't just because that's how he talks. Yes. But also there was a reason that he said it that way. That was there to be a tool for you, Luke, to learn to think about this thing in not just, I need to solve this one riddle right in front of me, but all the extraneous information that goes along with it. How do you, it's like layers of riddles upon riddles, but it intentionally. So you're always cracking something up in it and understanding a deeper meaning, sort of like the mystery of the ages sort of thing of like the Masons tend to follow. Like you're always opening up a new layer of that. And I think by oversimplifying, Luke has missed that. And I think he's fine right now. It's fine, but I think it's an indicator of, if you do that too much, what will end up happening is the original message that was super powerful and really was a jewel box of just opening new layers and learning new things is diminished into one message just so you can hear it one time and go, oh, cool, I can go do something with that. I think it's an interesting dynamic that's going to have to play out. We know what it turns out like for Luke, but I think still seeing it on the screen and hopefully seeing it more, we'll get to see how that plays over time and how it really does work out.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sorry, by the way, like I feel like I'm yelling this entire episode because I'm so excited.
You were definitely not. You're totally fine.
the other part of this too, when you were talking about that, is like we both have kids, and a part of being a parent is being a teacher. And one of the hardest things when you're teaching and when you're a parent is not doing everything for your child, or doing everything for your student. That it's all the whole, oh yeah, Yoda spoke in riddles. And I'm sure that was a callback to Yoda spoke backwards. But I also think it was because Yoda made you do the work. That was what made, by the way, all of that dialogue in Empire Strikes Back. That's why I didn't doubt the puppet, by the way. Like, I bought in that this little frog thing is great. But yeah, I think about sequences in Empire Strikes Back where Yoda says, Luke's like, oh, I feel cold, death. What is that? And Yoda's like, that place is strong with the dark side of the Force. In you must go. And Luke says, well, what's in there? And Yoda says, only what you take with you. And yeah, that's a riddle, but it is also he is trying to give Luke advice but experience is sometimes the greatest teacher. And as a parent, and both of us have also helped to teach people, and have worked as have been both mentees and mentors. The best thing you can do is guide someone to those experiences, guide them through those experiences, but let them do it on their own. Episode 8, another great line from Yoda: failure is life's greatest teacher. Or the greatest teacher failure is. This is this was great. It was great to watch Luke explore who he is as a teacher. But I will say, while all this is going on, it cuts back to Ahsoka talking to Mando. And by the way, I've got my hot take on my grade for this episode. We're going to get to our letter grade. I know it's 9:56, but we're going to get to our letter grade. And I got my hot take. Ahsoka says to Mando, is he a foundling or is he a Padawan? And I loved this. I loved this as the push and pull. I loved how this entire episode was about having to make choices. And as you grow up in life, often you realize that sometimes the right thing to do, or often the right thing to do, is the hardest thing to do. Mando's got to make a choice. Do I go and meet with Grogu knowing that I just want to meet with him, or is this the best thing for him?
Right.
And then, of course, the story shifts back from this beautiful, lush, green environment back to the deserts of Tatooine, where more people have to make choices. And
that the two choices. So, like you said, we're near the end of the hour, so we haven't even got back to Tatooine and talked about all the stuff that
we haven't got back to Tatooine.
Like, we haven't even talked about the fact that Cad Bane is in the episode. Okay, but I'll stop. Cad Bane, he's right there on my screen, right there. Cad Bane. But that's that. It's interesting, like you said, it's a ton of choices, and there's two choices specifically. When the one that Ahsoka, she basically puts a choice in front of Mando, but she doesn't put it to him in a very strong way. It's like you said, he makes a comment. He's a Mandalorian foundling. This is for him. And she looks in the distance. She looks back at him. She goes, maybe he's a Padawan. And she says it with a very subtle question mark. It's not a hard boom. Like, I think he might be a Padawan now. No. She says it with maybe he's a Padawan. And then just stops. And then she just kind of walks away and leaves him to think about that for a minute, so that she's not implying that he needs to make a choice. She's not going to make the choice for him. She won't even stop him if he makes a choice. Like, screw that, I'm going to go over and see Grogu right now. She wouldn't do anything. She's just laying this thing in front of him saying, this is just a thought experiment you need to be going through right now. And you make your choice. You're an adult. You can make whatever choice you want. But you're not thinking about it from both perspectives, so I'm going to give you the other one. And now you can think about both and make whatever decision you want to make. But I think you compare that with the choice that at the end of the episode, we should just say it, is Luke is kneeled down. They're in the partially built temple, or school, I should say, school, not temple. And Grogu's kneeling in front of him. Luke has a mat in front of him, and he lays out the little package that Mando gave him with the chain, the Beskar chainmail for Grogu to protect him. Lays it down and explains what it is. Grogu gets super excited. He goes, before you do that, he pulls out Yoda's lightsaber and ignites it. And, oh my God. Great. And shows him Yoda's lightsaber and then puts it down. And it says, you have a choice to make. It's this or the other thing. Basically, be a foundling or be a Jedi, is what he's giving him. And I find it so interesting because the choice that, and of course the episode ends with a close-up of Grogu, and we don't know what the choice is. We'll find out in the next episode, presumably. But what's interesting about that choice to me is that Luke is giving him a hard and fast choice and implying to him that you get to pick one or the other, but whichever one you pick, you don't get to be the other one at all. Whereas Ahsoka giving Din Djarin she's not actually giving him a choice to make. She is simply giving him a perspective to have, and then letting him do what he's going to do. And so it's a softer approach, but I also love that she sort of is like, look, you can tell she is resigned to like, I am not a Jedi. I've embraced that.
Yeah.
I am not. I walked away from the Jedi Order, and I've accepted that. I will provide people guidance and some information when they ask for it, but I'm not here to play a role in what you are doing. And I really love that her approach to guiding Din is very subtly different than the way Luke approached it with Grogu. But I think it's a very important difference, because what we see with Luke is a repetition of this dogmatic approach, both by the Mandalorians and the Jedi. It is not unique, and by a lot of others in the galaxy. It's not unique to one or the other. It's as if you somehow cannot be both of these things. You cannot have the attachment to be a Jedi. You cannot have attachment. Well, we're seeing this in all the High Republic stuff that's coming out. Like, that's that's actually not true at all. You can, so long as you understand the context with which and why the attachments can be a problem for you when you need to make a decision for the greater good. That's one of the problems I think that it gets missed, and I think that's what's so lovely about this episode, is getting to see that play out that way. And when you think about it, you're like, it's perpetuating with what Luke believes the Jedi have always thought, but we get to see that, like, no, but we're learning more and learning something new. What's going to happen next? And I love that, because they're two similar choices, but they're approached in different ways. It's subtly different, but it is a lot different.
Oh yeah, I mean, I feel like this gets back to the idea of, you know, the kind of gray Jedi, and we were talking about Game of Thrones at the start of this episode, and kind of the narrative structure that Game of Thrones works. And there's a great line that Maester Aemon says to Jon Snow, which is the same type of dichotomy, by the way. And just by the by, like, I was bummed out when poor little tiny Grogu has to now make a choice. But that's great storytelling. Force your characters into hard moments where they have to make a choice. And Jon Snow in Game of Thrones has to make a similar choice. And Maester Aemon says, "Love is the death of duty." What is duty in the face of a person that you love? What is duty what is duty when compared to a newborn child? Right. This is that attachment. And this is the attachment. This is the credo versus the person. And we've talked about this too, that there is no greater thing that you can write into a story than a character whose heart is in conflict with itself. And by the way, that's Luke. Ben, I can't kill my own father. I talk endlessly about how great the Avatar series is. The Last Airbender. The crux of a lot of these stories, great stories, are a character in conflict with themselves. Mm-hmm. And wow, if that wasn't what we got to see here, absolutely. Down to a literal choice. And then even later, when we're back on Tatooine, and we get the background on why Mando's got to go and talk to the marshal, and that line about there's no easy way to ask for a favor, and it's, hey, do you want to can you help us, or are you going to stand by and let us fall? Again, all this entire series is about episodes. I'm sorry, it's about choices. This entire episode is about making choices and the consequences of those choices, and how your emotions can control you, or you can control your emotions. This is
it was a good episode. I mean, we easily should do another episode just on the second half of the show. We haven't even got past the first half of the show yet.
Talked about crate dragon skulls on top of sand crawlers.
Oh no, that wasn't a crate dragon. That was the
what?
That was the rhinoceros like thing that he killed for the
that was the Mudhorn? I thought that was the giant crate dragon head.
No, that was remember, because as he flies by them, as his rocket pack, as he flies by, they're like, whoa! They're like waving at him, all excited. That was the Mudhorn.
Oh man, I could have sworn when I saw that, I was like, man, that's awesome. I honestly, it was great Star Wars visual. This
yeah.
is the kind of stuff that I enjoy. I loved even the comment when the Marshal, and by the way, like I know his name's not Bullock, but I'm just gonna call him Bullock. When Bullock's like,
He will
"Oh, is
forever
that
be known as Seth Bullock."
exactly right? Like, is that a Naboo starfighter? I love the deputy. We brought up that Cad Bane is here at the end of this episode. I know that we're over time. We can go back. We can talk about this, but I feel like we got to get into our letter grades.
Do it,
because that's what we've been doing.
and you got a hot take, so you have to go first.
Got a hot take, man.
Do
I got a hot take. Okay. For the Book of Boba Fett, this is solid F.
Really?
Solid F.
Okay.
Yeah, solid F. This is not a Boba Fett story. The episode before this isn't a Boba Fett story. The first 4 episodes that have been leading up to then take a totally divergent path. I was sitting here thinking, yikes. They misbuilt this series. They did not build this right. This should have been peppered all in together, or they should have figured out a different way to tell this narrative. When we rejoin Fennec Shand and we're talking about the 5 families and all this stuff, and I'm like, oh look, we're back to the Godfather stuff. It ripped me right out of the episode.
Yeah,
and I was just like, why are we here? What's going on? When we're in the club and that bomb goes off, and I was like, oh, this is the Godfather, this is Goodfellas, this is the gangster movies, we're back to the gangster movies again. It was such though a narrative like whiplash.
it was. Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie, as a representation of this series called The Book of Boba Fett, solid F.
Yeah,
I
agree.
I can't. I just can't get my mind around. There was something wrong here when they plotted this out. As I saw someone on Twitter though paint this a little differently, and this is how I'm gonna say it. He said to his family, "Oh hey, like I'm gonna go and sit down and watch Star Wars," and what he was talking about was Boba Fett, the Book of Boba Fett, and he said, "I don't care what this stuff is called, I just call it Star Wars." As a part of Star Wars, A+. A+.
Agreed.
I'm so happy this is a part of the canon. I'm so happy all of the things that we got to see, the characters, the time. The episode was long, and yet it felt like it went so fast. I could not tear myself away. I loved the Eastern cinema, Western cinema. I loved the references to things like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. When Luke runs up that bamboo.
Dude, I was getting Shang-Chi vibes, like for that whole first part. Absolutely.
It was amazing. So as Star Wars, as a part of Star Wars, as just TV that I like, solid A+. As this thing that I don't know what it is, which is the Book of Boba Fett, I think this is a failure, because what I'm seeing here in comparison, this is solid storytelling. Yeah. I don't know what the other stuff is.
I agree. I'm with you that this stuff should have been peppered in various places throughout the entire series or the entire season. And for me, for the Book of Boba Fett, like for that show, the show should have ended with the bomb exploding. Like, because it didn't, right? It ended with crap. Now I'm confused. It ended with Grogu making the choice, and then the show was over. Yeah, it should have ended with the bomb exploding, because to me that is here's the rallying cry for the people in Mos Espa to actually like that woman who was the woman running that bar was beloved. People loved her. It was a clean place, like it was a happy place. No one's frustrated, nothing like that. You just killed her. Like, I will say for everyone, it's been double checked a few times out there. I didn't check it. Max Rebo is okay. He was not. There was two Bith playing some music, but Max Rebo was not in the band that night, so I think Max Rebo is safe. I will say also, I had to tell my wife this, when I was growing up, Max Rebo was my favorite character in Star Wars. Like, I loved Max Rebo and the Max Rebo band. The dude was my jam. I saw him awesome. When he first came on the stage, when we saw him in one of the episodes, I was like, it's Max Rebo! I'm like, yeah! I was so excited. So he's safe. He's good. As far as we know, he's good. Max is not dead.
but again, because we've taken, like, this is almost a series that forgot its protagonist.
Yes.
And again, maybe it's because it was billed as the Book of Boba Fett. It could have been billed as the something with Mandalorian. It could have been a wider Mandalorian tale, because the previous episode where we spent all that time with Mando and no time with Boba Fett, only his name is mentioned. And that would have, and honestly, I would have been cooler with that story of the Book of Boba Fett, which is everybody else is talking about Boba Fett. All these things are happening around Boba Fett. We don't see it. There's a lot of different ways to do this narrative structure differently than the way that they did it, and you can see the effect of here. There's that character played by Jennifer Beals, who is the owner of that club. We have spent literal minutes with her, and now it's like, oh, this is just so bad that she's killed. And I'm sitting there thinking, we haven't spent that much time with her. We've spent now more time with Mando, Ahsoka, and Grogu, and I'm more invested in that storyline than trying to figure out, is it the Tatalias or the Barzinis that are really trying to pull down Mando?
The one worry that I have, as we kind of the one worry that I have with the final episode, as I mean, it would be cool if like Grogu chooses Mando or chooses both, and maybe Luke shows up with him, and they're like, you know what, he chose both, and that's okay. Oh, well, cool. Yeah, I don't know if that's actually going to happen. What I am worried about a little bit is they're going to pull like an Avengers Endgame with the end of it, and have like Luke and Grogu show up, and then have like, Seth Bullock show up now, because he didn't get killed, he just got shot in the shoulder, but have him show up a little injured, but the weak way that was like standing up and dead, like giving the stink eye to Cad Bane as he walked away. There was that weak way that stood up and just kind of like stared him down as he walked away. Like, okay, townspeople will show up. And then I'm worried though that they're going to pull something like, Bo-Katan Kryze and her group, her ilk show up, and like some other people show up to all kind of help. I'm a little worried of this like Avengers Endgame thing with like all the heroes come and show up at the same time to fight the evil cartel. I'm like, it'd be fun to watch. Don't get me wrong. Like, I would thoroughly enjoy watching it and like, oh, all these characters. But I'm worried because I'm a little fearful they're going to do something like that, and it's going to feel like it cheapens everything. We've talked about this before, where it's like almost like that isn't earned. Like, you haven't earned those characters arriving. So I hope that doesn't happen, but I have this weird pit in my stomach that they might do something like that, and it's like, please don't, because this needs to be a struggle for everybody to get to where they need to be. But if you just bring in all the special characters at the same time, it's like, but you didn't earn any of that. They just kind of show up because you're cool and they like you. Like, I don't know. Like, that doesn't feel, I don't know. We'll
everybody wants to eat their dessert first. Nobody wants to have dinner. You gotta earn this stuff. I'm worried about that too. I was also like, kind of like, we go to the village with Bullock, and I'm like, why are we here? Why can't we go and get some Tusken Raiders? Why isn't he there? Like, Quetzalcoatl Haderach? Like, can't Boba just be like, hey, Tusken Raiders, I like, who I am. I thought that this was really strange. I'm more, and this is what I mean by this is a failure of the show. I care less about the plot of what's happening with Boba Fett and more about like, oh my gosh, like, what is Grogu gonna choose? Like, I'm more there. I've never seen a show shoot themselves in the foot so badly with its own protagonist. It's like if
you just
it's like if you started, and it's almost like in like movies in the 60s, like French New Wave films, they often did that, where you were following a character and then it would just shift over to another character, and that was because they were like, look, we're gonna break cinema. This was something totally different. I feel like they just forgot that Boba Fett was their main character. We've spent so much time in that back to tank, and now we're doing like a weird heist movie, and somehow Boba's a hero, and it's like, have you earned that?
It's almost like one of the terms you introduced me early on in the show that in our doing this show, I didn't know, but like, it's almost like this show has jumped the shark and then grown a beard in the same season.
Yes. Oh like, my gosh.
It's almost like we just grew, like we jumped the shark and then, oh shit, that was
jumped the shark.
Shit. Yeah. We need to go get a beard because we gotta turn this thing back around again and do something with it. But they almost did that like in a totally different direction. Not almost. They literally did it in a totally different direction. And it's like, I'm enjoying that from a Star Wars, like you said, storytelling perspective. But for this show, it's like, dude, like you kind of fell on your face with the show. Like just yeah.
Totally. No, and again, I know we're like now 15 minutes over, but a really great book, and this is something that I was told. I came up in the English program. Really great book should look like at times a closet of clothing, and some of the clothes can all be different, but they all go together, and that's kind of like, oh, this all makes sense. This would be like if I open my closet and I'm like, okay, cool, like white button-up shirt, a sweater, oh, an astronaut's uniform, look, a kilt. You know what I mean? It's like all of. By the way, if someone has a closet that's like that, you win. You win a prize. I don't know what it is, but you win a prize.
I do have a custom kilt in my closet. There's that.
See, but now we just gotta get the astronaut uniform. But the point is that this was so like such a departure within the same story. It was almost like someone saw the dailies or they saw the rough cut of the first 4 episodes and said, yo, I don't like where this is going. Let's bring back Mando. Let's tell the rest of that story. People love that stuff. And they're like, well, what do you want to do with these other 4 episodes? They're like, well, we built them, so run them. And you know, someone, no, this there should have been a no here, or there should have been revision. There should have been someone that stepped in and said, this sticks out like a sore thumb. I don't know what this upcoming last episode, how this would be. I see Rich, by the way, is giving so many different versions of what the show could have been. The Boba years, the reign of Boba. I started writing down things like, I remembered when I saw the Age of Ultron, and I remember thinking, you mean the Days of Ultron? I put the paragraph of Boba Fett. The misadventures of Boba Fett. Again, it would have been better to do that. And also, I don't need a big battle in the street. I wanted Boba to be the smart guy. We've seen battles in the street. I kind of was hoping we'd get the baptismal scene in The Godfather. And I don't know, Jeff, if you've had the time yet to watch The Godfather. Spoilers for The Godfather, but it ends in an amazing way with this baptismal scene, and that is kind of what I thought was going to happen. Yeah. And I was hoping that would be what would happen.
We'll see. I'm curious to see what they do in the last episode. But yeah, I'm with you that, like, by the way, when you made the comment there about like someone saying, well, we got the things, run them. You sound like you were channeling J. Jonah Jameson right there. You really did. Like you had that sort of vibe for a minute. Well, listen, we're a little bit over. A little bit. We could probably keep going.
Just a little bit.
Long time, as everyone can tell. But thanks everyone
pages of notes. So many notes.
And thank you everyone for sticking with us. We really appreciate it. And thank you for sticking through the spoilers, because there was a lot of them tonight. And there's going to be more next week when we do it again.
Yes.
So just know that it's going to be the final episode. It'll be a complete bonanza of spoilers when we do it.
Oh, Jeff, your letter grade for the episode. We did not get to your letter grade before as we close.
I'm going to call it a C.
Ooh.
I'm with you on the. I'm kind of splitting the difference, because I thoroughly enjoy all the Star Wars, nerdgasms that I had the entire episode. Like, it was just like, oh, you are checking off every single box. Matter of fact, after watching it, I crammed in the last 2 days for every single break that I had. I crammed in the 3rd book of one of the most recent Thrawn trilogies that came out like a few years ago. Not the most current one where Thrawn is young and it takes place in the Ascendancy, but a couple years ago when they did one of his travels becoming the Grand Admiral that we knew and loved. The last episode, our book is called Treason, and I'm like, I have to read. I don't know why, but it compelled me to re-listen to it. So like, I've just been cramming this content in my head for a couple of days now, because the episode just was like, oh my god, all these things I need to know. With you though, that as much as I loved it, this was a different show. These were the last 2 episodes were episodes from a different show entirely, and so while I enjoyed it, I give it a solid C. And I don't want to make past judgments on anyone, but I really do feel like it feels like Dave Filoni or Jon Favreau. Like, I don't want to blame Robert Rodriguez, but it kind of feels like they left a little too much control to him, and then they came back in the room the next day and went, oh, dude, no, that's crap. Okay, we're gonna we're gonna go have some coffee. We're gonna go over here, and then hey Bryce, can you come give us a hand real quick? And then like got back onto maybe a path that they were looking for. But the problem with that is you now have two distinctly different TV shows. And
yes.
So I give it a C because I really enjoyed it, and that does have a lot of weight for me. But yeah, they could have done better. They could have done better.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I feel like, again, I've never seen a series forget its protagonist.
Right?
You know, I mean, just like, oh, whoops. Again, it's the memory of Boba Fett.
Exactly.
But yeah.
Well, listen, everyone, thank you so much for being here. Amy, I have you up on the screen here. Thank you for joining us. I think you've been on one other show before, but it's awesome to have you here. I'm so glad you were able to make it.
Thank you so much.
Rich and Derek and Jock and everyone else who was here tonight. Thank you all for being a part of the show. We'll be back next Thursday, every Thursday, 9 p.m. Pacific time, spouting off about Boba Fett as long as there's Boba Fett, and then we'll get back to some other programming, like more comic book stuff. Like, I just found this day, this is not the expensive cover because I'm not going to buy that, but this is a new run of that's part of Star Wars: The High Republic. But this is a new story run, specifically part of the what is it called? The Galactic Star Cruiser encounter they released at Disney World. This is a comic series that is based off of that situation, I guess, an encounter at Disney World, which is rad. And for anyone who didn't know, that Jedi on the front here, this Wookiee, his name is Buryaga, High Republic. Those are the robes they wear in the High Republic. So if you had to recognize it, but so much more to talk about.
And by the way, we're going to be talking about in future episodes the Skywalker Saga, Lego Skywalker Saga, which finally
has a
date. Looks like it has a date. It's been delayed since like before the pandemic.
Yeah.
So it's something that I know a lot of people have been looking forward to. We're going to be talking about gaming. We're going to talk about comics. We're going to be talking about all those things, but obviously for the next episode and maybe even the episode after, might even do a series review and go end to end on that one to be able to talk about how it all worked out from episode 1 all the way to the last episode of it. But yeah, I'm really excited to be able to be here every single week to be able to talk about this. So Good deal.
Awesome, everyone. Thanks. Like, subscribe, all the things. Have a good night. Thank you all for being here. We will see you soon.
Right on. Thanks, everybody.